What I am about to tell you was once considered dangerous knowledge, the kind whispered in sealed rooms and erased from public language because it gives you back control over something modern systems profit from keeping broken. You were taught that depression is a chemical accident, that serotonin disappears randomly, and that only an external substance can replace it. That story is incomplete, and its incompleteness is not innocent. Long before antidepressants existed, ancient practitioners understood that mood, hope, and emotional stability could be summoned or destroyed by something far more primitive and far more powerful: breath. I am not speaking metaphorically. I am speaking biologically. There is a reason this mechanism was softened, diluted, and rebranded as relaxation. Properly applied, it is not calming. It is activating. It forces the nervous system to shift states, and that shift directly alters serotonin signaling. This is why it was considered forbidden. Because once you understand it, you stop waiting to be fixed. You stop identifying as chemically deficient. You realize depression is not a life sentence, but a stuck physiological state. I am here to decode that hidden mechanism, to connect modern neuroscience with practices that survived because they worked, not because they were spiritual. You are not broken. You are misregulated. And regulation begins with breath, whether the system wants you to know that or not. You know this state intimately, even if no one has ever named it correctly for you. Depression is not just sadness. It is the sensation of being locked inside your own nervous system. You wake up already tired, not because you didn't sleep, but because your biology never truly powered down. Your thoughts loop without resolution. Motivation feels chemically unavailable, not absent by choice. And the most dangerous part is this: you begin to believe this flattened inner world is who you are. That belief is the real trap. You were told to think differently, to be patient, to medicate the symptoms, yet no one explained why willpower fails so consistently. The reason is simple and brutal. When serotonin signaling is suppressed, the brain shifts into a defensive operating mode where future-oriented thinking, pleasure, and emotional flexibility are biologically restricted. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are running on a threat-based chemistry designed for survival, not meaning. And here is the stake that almost no one explains clearly enough. If serotonin is not restored naturally, the nervous system adapts to its absence and starts calling that emptiness normal. That is how years disappear. That is how identity collapses into diagnosis. This is why restoring serotonin is not about comfort. It is about reclaiming agency. Breathing is not an accessory to healing. It is the missing lever. Ignore it, and you remain dependent. Use it correctly, and the system begins to unlock from the inside. Here is the myth that keeps you confused and compliant. Serotonin lives only in the brain, and once it drops, you must import it from the outside. That idea sounds scientific, but it hides a deeper truth that rarely makes it into public conversation. More than 90% of your body's serotonin is regulated outside the brain, through systems that listen not to thoughts, but to rhythm, pressure, and chemical balance. Your gut, your lungs, your blood chemistry, and your autonomic nervous system are not passive background players. They are the command center. Breathing is the language they understand. Every inhale and exhale changes carbon dioxide levels, blood pH, vagal signaling, and inflammatory tone, all of which directly influence how tryptophan is converted into serotonin and how that serotonin is actually used. When breathing is shallow, erratic, or chronically stressed, the body interprets life as unsafe. and serotonin is downregulated on purpose. Not because you are defective, but because joy is a liability in a perceived emergency. This is why forcing positivity fails, and why numbing can feel like relief, but never like restoration. The missing link is not more stimulation or distraction. It is reprogramming the body's sense of safety. Breath does that faster than cognition ever could. That is the hidden mechanism. Once you see it, the myth collapses and depression stops looking mysterious. It starts looking reversible. At the center of this reversal is a structure most people have never been taught to respect: the vagus nerve. This nerve is not poetic, and it is not abstract. It is a physical cable running from your brain into your heart, lungs, and gut, constantly asking one brutal question: are you safe, or are you in danger? Your answer is not given in words, it is given in breath. When breathing is fast, shallow, and chaotic, the vagus nerve sends a danger signal upward, suppressing serotonin, increasing inflammation, and locking the brain into survival mode. When breathing becomes slow, deliberate, and rhythmically controlled, vagal tone increases, and the signal flips. Safety is declared. Serotonin signaling is permitted to rise again. Think of the vagus nerve as a dimmer switch in a dark room. Depression is not the light being broken. It is the dimmer turned all the way down. Breath is the hand on that switch. Modern neuroscience confirms this, but ancient practitioners felt it without instruments. They understood that changing breath was the fastest way to change the mind, because it bypasses conscious resistance. You cannot argue your way out of a nervous system that believes it is under threat. You must speak to it in its native language. That language is respiration. And once the vagus nerve hears safety consistently enough, serotonin is no longer suppressed. It is restored as a biological consequence, not a hopeful wish. Now we go deeper, to the level where depression actually takes root: the cell. Inside your body, serotonin does not appear by magic, and it does not disappear by fate. It is manufactured through a biochemical pathway that is exquisitely sensitive to oxygen delivery, carbon dioxide tolerance, and blood acidity. When you chronically overbreathe or breathe under stress, carbon dioxide drops too low, blood pH shifts, and oxygen is paradoxically delivered less efficiently to tissues, including the brain. This creates a silent hypoxic stress that pushes tryptophan away from serotonin production and toward inflammatory byproducts instead. You feel this as heaviness, fog, and emotional numbness. Controlled breathing reverses this process. By slowing respiration and extending exhalation, carbon dioxide tolerance rises, blood chemistry stabilizes, and cells receive the signal to shift from defense to repair. This is where BDNF begins to increase, where neural connections regain flexibility, where the brain becomes capable of feeling again. Ancient traditions describe this as turning lead into gold. Modern labs call it metabolic optimization. The name does not matter. The mechanism does. Breath alters cellular chemistry, and cellular chemistry dictates mood. This is not philosophy. This is physiology. And once this shift begins, serotonin is no longer forced. It is synthesized, transported, and utilized the way it was always meant to be, as a product of balance rather than desperation. This is where modern science quietly meets ancient discipline, and where the story becomes uncomfortable for those who prefer to label old knowledge as superstition. Monastic orders, yogic lineages, and even warrior cultures did not train breath for calm alone. They trained it to control mood, courage, despair, and clarity under extreme conditions. They had no language for serotonin, vagal tone, or neuroplasticity, yet they mapped the effects with ruthless precision. Certain rhythms lifted melancholy. Others induced focus or emotional detachment. These were not spiritual accidents. They were early experiments in nervous system control. What we now measure in laboratories, they felt in their bodies. The reason these practices survived is not because they were beautiful, but because they worked. When modern research confirms that slow nasal breathing increases vagal tone, reduces inflammation, and normalizes neurotransmitter balance, it is not discovering something new. It is translating something old. This translation strips away the myth and reveals the technology underneath. Breath was the interface. Depression, in this context, was never a moral failure or a mysterious curse. It was a loss of regulatory skill. When you restore that skill, you are not adopting a belief system. You are reclaiming a function your nervous system already knows how to perform. That is why this knowledge feels familiar the moment you hear it. Your body remembers before your mind does. Now understand this clearly before you go any further. What I'm about to introduce is not a relaxation exercise, and it is not optional breathing advice. This is a protocol. That word matters. A protocol is precise because biology is precise. Casual breathing produces casual results, and depression does not yield to casual effort. The nervous system responds only to clear, repeated signals delivered with consistency. This is why most people try breathing once, feel nothing dramatic, and quietly conclude it does not work. They were never shown how to speak loudly enough to their own biology. This protocol was refined because small details change outcomes. The speed of the inhale, the length of the exhale, the use of the nose, the pause between breaths. Each element targets a different layer of serotonin regulation. Miss one and the signal weakens. Combine them correctly, and the body cannot ignore it. I want you to feel the weight of this moment. You are not learning a technique. You are being handed a lever that directly interfaces with your mood chemistry. Treat it with respect. Perform it exactly. This is not about comfort. It is about recalibration. And once you understand that, you are ready to execute, not experiment. You begin by positioning the body so the nervous system is not fighting gravity or tension. Sit upright or lie flat, spine neutral, jaw unclenched, tongue resting softly against the roof of the mouth. The mouth stays closed. Air moves only through the nose because nasal breathing directly stimulates vagal afferents and stabilizes nitric oxide, both critical for serotonin signaling. You inhale slowly for a count that feels controlled but not strained, allowing the belly to expand before the chest, signaling safety at the most primitive level of the brain. Then comes the part most people skip and pay for later. The exhale is longer than the inhale, deliberately longer. This extended exhalation is the command that tells the nervous system the threat has passed. At the end of the exhale, you pause briefly, not forcing, simply allowing stillness before the next inhale arrives. During this pause, carbon dioxide rises slightly, blood pH normalizes, and vagal tone increases. You repeat this cycle again and again. Rhythm over intensity, precision over effort. Thoughts will intrude. That is expected. You do not fight them. You return to the count, to the nose, to the slow emptying of the lungs. Inside your body, chemistry is shifting. Inflammation is dropping. Serotonin pathways are reopening. You are not calming down. You are coming back online. The changes this protocol creates follow a timeline, not because the mind needs convincing, but because biology moves in stages. After the first session, many people notice something subtle but unmistakable. a slight quieting of internal noise, a sense that the body is less hostile from the inside. This is vagal tone responding immediately. Within 3 days of consistent practice, sleep often deepens, not longer but heavier, because serotonin begins re-establishing its role as a precursor to melatonin, rather than being diverted into stress chemistry. Around day 7, motivation starts to return in fragments. Not manic energy, but the ability to initiate small actions without internal violence. This is a critical sign that serotonin signaling is stabilizing in the prefrontal cortex, allowing intention to translate into movement again. Over several weeks, emotional range widens. Music lands differently. Conversations feel less draining. The world regains texture. This is not mood improvement through belief. This is neuroplasticity, reopening, as BDNF rises and inflammatory suppression lifts. The most important shift is this. The depressive state stops feeling permanent. Even on difficult days, the nervous system remembers another setting exists. That memory alone changes behavior, and behavior reinforces chemistry. This is how a loop breaks, not by force but by restoration. You need to be warned about something most people misinterpret and then abandon the process because no one prepared them. In the early days, this protocol can feel uncomfortable, emotionally raw, or strangely intense. That does not mean it is harming you. It means your nervous system is exiting a long-standing chemical pattern it had learned to survive in. Depression is familiar to the brain, even when it is painful. When serotonin begins to return, old emotional signals can surface because the system is no longer numbed. This can feel destabilizing if you expect immediate peace. Do not confuse withdrawal from stress chemistry with regression. Head pressure, spontaneous sighs, sudden sadness, or brief waves of irritability are signs of recalibration, not failure. The brain is renegotiating its baseline. Many people quit right here because comfort has been mistaken for healing, but comfort kept you stuck. This phase passes as regulation stabilizes, and those sensations fade into clarity and steadiness. If you respect the protocol and do not shorten the exhale, mouth breathe, or rush the rhythm, the nervous system adapts safely. Resistance is not a signal to stop. It is evidence that something fundamental is changing. Now the responsibility shifts fully to you. Knowledge alone changes nothing unless it is embodied. And this is where most people quietly retreat, back into explanation instead of action. I am challenging you to commit to this protocol exactly as described for a fixed period of time. Not when you feel like it. Not when it is convenient. But daily, with discipline. For at least 14 days. No modification. No shortcuts. No mixing it with distractions to make it more comfortable. This is not about motivation. Motivation returns after chemistry shifts, not before. Treat this as an experiment on your own nervous system, one where you are both the subject and the operator. Each session is a signal to your biology that you are no longer outsourcing regulation. That alone is disruptive. That alone is powerful. Understand what you are really doing here. You are withdrawing from a state of learned helplessness and reasserting control at the level where mood is actually decided. Most people will not do this, not because it is difficult, but because it requires them to stop identifying with their depression. If you accept this challenge, you are choosing regulation over resignation. And once that choice is repeated enough times, chemistry follows. I want you to leave this understanding with absolute clarity. Depression is not your personality, not your truth, and not your destiny. It is a physiological state sustained by miscommunication between breath, nerves, and chemistry. When that communication is restored, identity loosens its grip around suffering. I have spoken with authority because this subject demands it. Soft language keeps people passive. Precision wakes them up. Breath is not symbolic. It is mechanical, chemical, and relentlessly honest. It does not care about your past stories, only about the signals you send right now. When you practice this protocol, you are not hoping to feel better. You are training your nervous system to recognize safety again. And serotonin follows safety every time. This is how mastery begins. Quietly, internally, without permission. You now understand a mechanism most people never learn. Not because it is complex, but because it is empowering. Use it. Return to it when your system drifts. Let breath become your baseline regulator, not an emergency tool. When mood stabilizes from the inside, life stops feeling like something to survive and starts feeling navigable again. That shift is not mystical. It is earned.